Welcome to the Fancy a Brew podcast. I'm Andy the Northern Diver. In this series I'll be discussing adventure, conservation and progression in scuba diving with some really interesting and inspirational divers that you might or not have heard of. The podcast is supported by Northern Diver International and you the listener through Patreon. So grab yourself a brew and enjoy this week's episode. Right, so Julie Hartup, welcome to Fancy a Brew podcast. I can't thank you enough for coming at such a late hour for you and such an early hour for me, while we're the other side of the world. So first of all, what brew are you drinking? What have you got?
Water.
I was hoping you were going to say it was a gin and tonic, because that'd be quite cool.
We can say gin. We can say gin and tonic. I might switch over to gin and tonic halfway through.
Mate, I might do. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning here. What time is it there?
Oh, geez. It's 8, just after 8. So PM.
It's not horrendous then. It's not like it's 11 o'clock. I've had to do one of them before. Someone was in Australia once and just couldn't get on Zoom early enough. So it was like 11 o'clock at night, I think it was. It was ridiculous. So do you want to give us a bit of a brief rundown who you are and why I've got you on?
Yeah, so I actually live out here in Guam. We're a little tropical island, probably like is about the central part of the Pacific Ocean. And I'm a researcher of manta rays out here. And just recently, some of the work that I've been doing here in Guam was featured on A Perfect Planet. And so people are starting to know a little bit more about my work when they're like, hey, that was pretty cool to see those mantas and the fish. And so now people are kind of questioning, like, what are you doing and who are you, and so that's why I'm here. Explain a little bit about that.
So have you found then your social media and stuff's gone through the roof? Have you got like 250,000 followers and all that kind of stuff now?
I haven't really looked. I know that I'm getting more and more, and the more it, gets out there, I'm Manta Mum, so people can't look up my name and go. And it's spelled the English way, M-U-M, not the U.S. way.
Yeah, when I was doing my obvious research to find a little bit more about you, it was Manta Mom, and I was like, yeah, I'm surprised that you've called it Manta Mum. To be fair, I thought you'd have, like, honest to God, because of the work you do, I thought you'd have a huge following. You probably won't now. Now you've been on my podcast, it'll probably go down.
No.
But obviously, if you're getting more and more known, then
we have what happened is I started an NGO. So actually my personal one was actually our NGO, and then I switched it. I switched it over to our NGO, and then I started my own. So I had to. But in some ways it's kind of nice because, it's more personal, and I can post up pictures about my family or something, and people don't go, oh, we want manta photos. We don't want pictures of your kids or anything.
But it's good. I mean, I keep looking at my Instagram and thinking, do I go through and make it just about scuba diving, or because I've come off Facebook. I don't like Facebook at all. I think it's quite a negative thing. Certainly I'm a more negative me I like gobbing off sometimes when I shouldn't. But I keep looking through my Instagram and going, I should probably take that picture down because it's not really about scuba diving, it's just about me and life. But I think people want to see that personal side of you as well.
That's the thing, is I'm doing it. I mean, this is who I am, half the time, and I'm in the water, and the other half I'm doing laundry, or I'm, racing to go get a kid from school, or, hanging out with my older kids and partying with them. And, that's just, that's just who I am. So, I guess, it's about, I guess, being authentic. That's kind of, my journey has really been about being authentic and who I am. And that's my Instagram is who I am. So,
well, tell us a bit more about you, because what interested me, you are not just a zoologist, are you? You've got quite an interesting past, which is why I wanted to talk to you. I like someone with a bit of interest, a bit of smile, a bit of personality about them, and you certainly got bags of that. So, just give us a bit.
we could really get into some funny stuff, but
Let's do it.
so, well, I don't know how much detail you want, but I'm adopted. That's the number
Yeah.
that a lot of people don't
Wow.
know that. But I was
No.
adopted, and I was adopted really young. And
Yeah.
actually, my birth dad was a pro wrestler from
Cool.
Canada. Yeah, and he's actually Scottish. So, he had gone over from Scotland to Canada. His stage was as Duncan McTavish, the Fighting Scotsman. So, but he met my mom on, one of their little tours they were doing, and
Yeah.
she ended up pregnant. And he went on, he kept on going on tour. I think if I did one of those DNA things, I'd probably have numerous siblings, like depending on where he was at, you know.
Yeah.
But so my mom was young. She was Mormon, so a very conservative Utah family, and she put me up for adoption. And I was adopted by my parents into a Mormon home, religious home, and I grew up in Utah. So I grew up in Provo, Utah. Mormons are known for having multiple wives. They stopped doing that at some point. So my dad only had one wife.
Yeah. Is it
But
quite a strict upbringing that?
oh, for sure. Yeah, it's very traditional. Mom stays at home, dad goes
Yeah.
to work. No coffee, no alcohol. Um, you know, no sex before marriage. All those things that you find often in conservative religions. So,
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I was growing up. I had a little, I was one of those that kind of pushed the edge a little bit, and I thought I was like wild until you go talk to my real wild friends. I'm like, oh yeah, I was not wild. But I was a Mormon who thought I was wild.
Oh,
So, but
cool.
I ended up getting married very young, barely 19. Um, had kids, started having kids right away. 3 kids, and it was just really. I love being a mom, but I just didn't sign up to do everyone's laundry and just cook for everyone. And I was like, this is my life. Like, this is what they raised me like is the, holy grail of like, oh, you're so happy, you're going to be so happy doing this. And I was like, I'm just cleaning up after people, like,
Yeah.
I'm not even getting paid for it,
Yeah, it wouldn't be so
So,
bad if it was a job, would it? And you're actually getting a salary for it.
yeah. Yeah, I could get a little petty cash here or something, but no, I was just and I just started thinking, there has to be something more to life than just this. I was very unhappy. And that's fine if people are, if they're fine with that and it has a place in
Yeah.
life. But I just kept on feeling like needs to be something more. And I actually, with my ex-husband, we went and got certified in diving. And the whole idea was we were going to go on this like scuba trip and,
Yeah.
make reignite your marriage while diving. And we went to take the class and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. This is me. I found it, And yet my ex-husband he was like running away. He was doing runaway ascents. Like I was like, what is he doing? Why is he
Yeah.
this? Why is he up there? Like, and the instructor was like trying to calm him down. He did not like it. So,
Really?
yeah, it was like this, I took to it. He wasn't comfortable in it, so it
Hmm.
didn't really ignite the marriage anymore. Uh,
Not in the way you meant it to anyway.
yeah,
Set fire to the
exactly.
marriage certificate.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I just, I loved diving. I couldn't get enough of it. And I wanted not only to get, because I was landlocked. So I was like diving in lakes and stuff like that.
Mm,
But I wanted also experience diving and just as much experience diving in the ocean. And
yeah.
so I actually started going out to Catalina, doing like the lobster dives there where you go out gathering lobster. And
Yeah.
I just, I was always into Grand Cayman. I saw my first manta in Grand Cayman. I just, man, it was just, I couldn't get enough of it. And I wanted to become an instructor. So I just went from class to class. And when I got to a certain point, my ex-husband was like, you really need to be at home. This isn't, and I was making a career of it. And he was like, you need to give it up. And I was like, well, that's not happening. So, so I
I'm
chose
giving you up.
diving. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, it just, it, I guess when you look back on it, we were just so young.
Mm,
He had
yeah.
ideas and what he wanted in life. And obviously wasn't old enough to know that I wanted something different in a different direction. So, yeah, so I got divorced and then I had these 3 kids and I was like, now what? And how am I going to afford, taking care of 3 kids and I'm still in Utah and I'm one of those cuz now I'm divorced, I'm
Mm,
one of those that are divorced. And I actually had a friend talk to me about going into marine biology. And so I tried out a class and loved it. And so now everything that I was seeing underwater, I was now learning about it. And the same kind of thing, I couldn't get enough of it. So
yeah.
it really set me down a whole different path. I was with our school. I was my undergraduate. I was a research diver for about 6 years and was out at Stanford's Marine Lab, Hopkins Marine Station. We would be out there every spring, and then it just turned into more classes there and an internship at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and it just kind of took its own path. And it gave me the confidence that I needed
Yeah.
to go forward. And I think for me, that's what diving did. Is it gave me that confidence? Like, yes, I am smart. Yes, I am good at something, and in doing something you really enjoy. And so it made going home and doing all the laundry way worth it once I could, after a
Yeah.
good dive.
It's nice.
So
It's nice when your path sort of rolls on organically, isn't it? Rather than forced down one route than another, by
yeah.
someone or by events. Now, I'm obviously trying to develop my career in diving now, and I look back and I
Hmm.
feel really fortunate. I've ticked lots of boxes that at the
Hmm.
time I didn't realize were quite valuable now. So much like you,
Hmm.
you'd gone down that path, and
Yeah.
your ability to do stuff is sort of channeled by your past as well.
Yeah.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, and I've really encouraged a lot of our students to get their dive master or go on to instructor level because really our university needed someone who was at an instructor level, and
Mm,
so it really was, that past of being able to do all those classes and becoming an instructor that got me to a level where, it's much easier to teach someone about what they're seeing underwater than I think
yeah.
than gaining all of a sudden experience in diving. So I've seen it the opposite where people have done a lot of the book work but then they haven't gotten in the ocean yet, and then they're they're like trying to start and it's difficult for them, and so
Yeah.
I think it really gave me an advantage to just have the diving as second nature, so
Mhm.
then I could really focus on what I was seeing and what I was doing. And you didn't have to remember to look at your gauge, that was just something I already
Second
did,
nature, innit?
yeah.
Yeah.
Writing down something underwater, it's almost, it's just second nature to look at your gauge. But if you're
Yeah.
a brand new diver, it's like they can forget, and
Yeah.
so that's where that experience really helped out.
So how did you get into mantas from that?
Oh man.
Or
I
did
know.
you end up in
So
Guam first? What was it?
I know.
What was
Yes.
that?
So after I got divorced, I actually met my now present husband. I was actually his TA in one of our classes,
Yeah.
and he was going to dental school. So we actually went to Florida for about 4 years while he went to dental school. While we were out there, and I did some diving, not a whole lot.
Mm.
But the idea was then when he was done with dental school, then we would find a place where both of us could have a career. And this job came up in Guam, and I must say I was ignorant. I thought like I did not know where Guam was, which is horrible. It's like a US territory and I had no idea where it was. I thought it was in the Caribbean or something, you know. And we looked it up and saw it was close, more by Asia, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go try it out. I mean, what's worse? So, I mean, we'll just try it out for a year and see how we like
Mhm.
it. And then got out here and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is like, it's a paradise island. I was like, had a women's dive club. Most of the time, I was
Really?
usually the only woman with, a group of men or something,
Yeah.
while I was doing my diving. Here they had a Wednesday dive group that was all women. I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like, and so we dove, we go on trips together. It was just, I was getting to know the marine life to figure out like, okay, what is it? What's my direction? How do I want to
Yeah.
take this? Because I know when you start into marine biology, you really start to focus on a, certain group of animals. And I didn't want to get bored and I didn't want to just pick one haphazardly. And so we went on our trip, on that girls' trip, that we called ourselves the Dive Divas. And we went to Yap, which is we went to this small island. It's about an hour plane ride, just kind of southeast of Guam, and it's a beautiful island. It's known. It's it doesn't have a lot of tourism, so you have just a couple of main hotels there. Monterey Bay is the one, and who I work closely with, Bill Ackard. He's known as the Manta Man, uh, and we went there and it was the first time I really got to spend time with mantas. And
Yeah.
I started talking with Bill Ackard and I was like, who's studying these? And realized no one had been studying them. I mean, they've been running this dive resort for like 30 years. I was like, wow, like someone needs to study these mantas, and so that's what took me into study mantas. Like, okay, I know what I want to study now. I want to study manta rays and go back and get my master's. And so that was the next chapter.
That's
so so I did
that's a
that. So
that couldn't be further from your sort of first part of your life, really, could it? What a
yeah,
dynamic change that is, having like a group of
yeah,
women that are allowed to do stuff, and it's the stuff you
yeah,
love.
yeah,
I've just while I was listening to you, because I keep looking at my map on the wall there trying to find
yeah.
Guam. No idea. I know I can see it now. I don't know how I've missed it, but I've just googled it, and it's almost south of Japan, isn't it? If you come right
Yeah,
down, I'd say middle of
yeah,
the
and just over.
Philippine Sea, between sort of Papua New Guinea
Hmm.
and Japan. And then I can
Yeah.
just about see Utah. It's flipping miles away. So did that not feel, although you felt quite welcomed there by the groups of people that you were
Yeah,
mixing with and doing what
yeah,
you
for
wanted, did you
sure.
not feel massively isolated from like the world?
No, well, not really, because everything I love to do is here,
Yeah,
and also I felt like it was like such a nice clean slate because, back at home you get kind of judged and,
yeah,
you know, even here I had people calling me up wanting to, invite me to church still,
yeah.
and it was just nice because I could just be me,
Mm,
and these women are, one of them I call my nana because they're strong women, and they just encourage you, and they just, and they were diving, and they were, grandmas. They weren't
yeah.
young. They were grandmas,
Great.
and I was like, yeah, like this is life. This is the way it should be,
Yeah.
and going on girls trips and drinking wine, and just, this is sign me up. This is the kind of lifestyle I want, and so, um, um, and it is. It's completely different, but I felt free. It was
Yeah.
actually the opposite. I feel very free here. And you would think, we're the small island, but we're actually really more accepting than a lot of different areas. And I think maybe it's just because we live on a small island, so we know that we have to get along and there's differences with everyone, and so
Yeah.
you just you kind of you just accept that there's different ways that people live,
Mm.
and it's very family oriented. It's matriarchal. So actually, Chamorro, the indigenous, it's matriarchal. I was like, yeah, this is
You're in
nice.
charge now.
Yeah,
I ain't doing no cleaning.
yeah,
Ace. I
yeah.
noticed looking at this here, it says just sort of north of you, you've got the Northern Mariana Islands. So is the Mariana Trench quite local to you?
Hmm. Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
get like a lot of scientists and that coming through Guam then to sort of work on that area?
yeah. Yeah, so we had James Cameron come in. We were able to see, I think it was called Challenger Deep, or I can't remember the
Yeah.
name of it, but we actually went on board and saw, when they were docked here. And so you get a lot of people coming in,
Awesome.
utilizing Guam to be able to get out to the trench area. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're really quite lucky that way. And it's a really nice kind of place where you can, I love visiting Japan. Most people would, you know, get in a car and go on a trip, but, we can't really do that. So you tend to like go different countries,
Yeah.
So I really have enjoyed getting to know the different Asian cultures and stuff. And that's been fascinating. And I love Japan, man. We every single time, we get to fly off over to Japan, and we go off and do that. And they,
Just gonna look how
and
far away that is.
Okinawa, like it's not too far. It's like a couple hour plane ride or whatever. But people don't realize, like in Japan, like in Okinawa, I loved Okinawa, and they have so much diving there,
Yeah.
and it had this like beachy feel, but it's Japanese, and so it's just kind of opened up this whole new world. So it's for me, I actually felt quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like there's this whole place to explore. And then that's not even, then you have all of the islands. So all of the work places I go and I do work in
Yeah.
are amazing islands where I just think, wow, I can't believe, and there's not a lot of tourism, so like Ponape, a lot of people know Palau,
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
but but Ponape, I think, is very comparable, their diving, to Palau. I
Right.
mean, we have black morph mantas there. It's really rich in water. It's just, oh man, I've had some fantastic dives there. Where there's this one called Ant Atoll, where you get it, going on an incoming current, on an incoming
Mm.
tide, and
Yeah.
so you're getting all that blue rich water going in, and so it's clear. And there's a part where I've looked up and I've tried to get pictures of it, but it just doesn't do it any justice. And it's when the top of the water is so flat that it acts like a mirror to the top
Yeah.
of the reef. So you look up and it's like this, it's a mirror. So you're seeing the top of the reef all along because it's so flat and
Yeah.
clear, and so to me, like, that's just like, wow, and I've tried, there's no picture that has ever done it justice.
Yeah.
So it's always, yeah, it just, so it's like a playground. There's so much to explore out here.
So who
So
do you work for? What do you do now? How do you make a
yeah, so
living?
I know. um, I actually started an NGO. Yeah, it's Micronesian Conservation Coalition.
Right.
I know we go by acronyms here, so MCC. So who's down with MCC? So Um, so everyone knows, like in the islands, it's more about the acronym of your,
Yeah.
your organization. So,
Nice.
but I, before that, I actually, when I started trying to figure out how to study mantas, I mean, we didn't have anyone at our university who studied mantas or elasmobranchs, which, that's your, whale sharks and skates and rays. And so I wrote Guy Stevens, who's part of Manta Trust. He's out of the UK.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, look, I'm in Guam. I really want to learn how to study, manta rays. And so he had me come out to the Maldives, and that's how I learned how to study manta rays. They taught me there. We would go out to Honeyfraru. I just had a fantastic time on how to actually go about studying manta rays, finding them on boats, then getting in the water. You have to dive and take picture IDs off of them because each one has a unique pattern, and just the basics of it. And then they've really supported me in my projects, not financially, but getting the word out and supporting me when I was like, how do I do this? What kind of tools do I need? Putting me in
Yeah.
touch with the people that I need to know. So that started, but that's more of an international, UK NGO. And so I needed to start more of a local NGO so I could maybe get grants and funding to study the Guam mantis, since we are a U.S. Territory. And so I started that, and I started that like 6 years ago, and it's just been crazy. It was really has done well. Really supported by the community. It's about also building capacity for upcoming students. So for me, my science needs to mean something. It's not just about for a paper or just for my own, career. It
Yeah.
really needs to mean something to the community I belong in. And so for me, the best kind of reward is to have a generation coming behind me who
Yeah.
will then take it to higher, to keep the research going. And so that's what we've been building here is really kind of a support for students, and it happens a lot of them are mostly women going into science
Nice.
and marine biology, and who are local, and that's where I believe we really make a difference, is when you build that capacity from within,
Yeah, definitely.
instead of
Well,
someone from the outside coming in and saying, you need to do this, you need to do
yeah.
that. I mean, you know
Yeah. I take it your funding, your grants and that, they're all part of like a scientific study through universities to try and improve that learning and get those, scientists trained up. But if you can, I appreciate that if
yeah,
you're going to use local people from Guam,
yeah.
that would encourage more people from Guam to take up this nature
Mhm.
sort of natural history.
Yeah.
That's the best way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, no, because if you think about it, I mean, that's it really needs to come from within when you're writing any kind of regulations or understanding about things. It just goes a lot farther if you have everyone here who understands that, instead of, someone coming from off island saying, well, this is what you need to be doing, and it's like colonialism, like we've been doing that a
Yeah.
lot. So
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, shut up.
So what university are you working for now? Or what?
So I actually graduated with my master's at the University of Guam.
Right.
So I finished that up, and I have a potential PhD um, off island, but I'd be doing all my work here. So I'd be going back and forth. But
Yeah.
because of COVID, like everyone, and because like we don't know when borders will be open. So
No.
I'm just collecting all my data and working on all my projects, and hopefully then it will just all roll over into a PhD. The
Yeah.
PhD will just kind of be from all that collected data
I get it.
already.
Has,
So
has, has COVID really affected Guam much, being so isolated?
We, at first we were doing really great, but we have three different military bases here. So we have like a Navy, and we have Air Force, and we have a Marine base that they're actually bringing over from Okinawa to here to Guam. And so there actually is kind of sometimes a difference of rules or regulations for, military, or depending on if they're running kind of things. And
Yeah.
so there was a couple of times where we had some outbreaks that were kind of brought from, you know, military coming in and breaking quarantine. and so
No, they don't break the rules. The
so we kind of
military. What are
had
you on
a
about?
I know. I know. So we had a little bit of an issue, and then we're actually really good now. And I got my first vaccine,
Is ya?
so yeah, I already have it, and so they're really hitting it hard because we just don't have the medical capacity. If
Yeah.
it were to really take hold, it would be really ugly. So
Mm.
a lot of times, and that's why you see a lot of these islands where they just, like, the Federated States of Micronesia just shut down. They're like, yep, sorry, we're closed, and they're just
Good.
not letting people
Yeah.
in. And it's because they just don't have that capacity to have any type
Yeah.
of medical, and it
Everyone
would
would
be
just die, wouldn't
devastating.
they?
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, it would, because you just don't have that. And then because of the culture, you have families that are living in multi-family, families that are multi-generational living together.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part, is it
Mhm.
just would spread really fast. So
Can you believe there's some people don't want to take the vaccine?
I you know I understand where people are kind of nervous, if they aren't familiar with science, or
Yeah.
they listen to too much of Facebook, or these all these theories out there.
They think they've got
But
GPS chips in the vaccine and all
yeah,
sorts of.
yeah, I know. But if you look at it, so many people have already been vaccinated,
Mm.
and it really, and you just have to look at history, where you've had so many different diseases that have just wiped out, and we've had, the history has shown, once they get a vaccine and everyone starts taking it, that goes away. It's a very, you don't see people dying of polio, in, uh, usually in you know places where you can get the vaccine,
Yeah.
or when you've had it when you were little. So I understand it can be kind of frightening if you don't know that much information, but
Yeah.
it just, yeah, I mean, what can you do? I felt that last way for the last 4 years in the US with Trump, so I was like, what can you
Right.
do?
So we've done religion and we've done politics.
Yeah.
let's
What
let's
else are
get
we not
back on the
supposed to
diary.
talk about?
I don't mind touching on it. It's just some people can be really like affected by it, can't they? Talking about those two topics. So
Oh, yeah.
I don't mind touching on it at
Very
all.
hard. I know.
I mean, I'm happy to like go deep, but that's not really what it's about. So I've encountered a manta once, and we were in the Red Sea in 2019, and it was quite a way above us. And I did,
Mm,
quite foolishly, I bombed up the water column to sort of be on the sort of same plane as
yeah,
it, and everyone was below. And it
yeah.
really thrived on everyone's bubbles, that it was going up
Mhm.
through the water column. And I was on the sort of same plane as it and trying to get some video footage of it. But do you dive on an open circuit, and
Yeah.
or do you go for a rebreather? And does it make any difference if you do? Is my question.
So it really depends on the population that I'm working with.
Yeah.
So in Guam, I actually, most of the time, I free dive with them,
Wow.
just because it's easy for me to get over the reef, and I just swim out, and then I just, most of the time, I'm just free diving with them. Um, but with the filming, we used rebreathers because, of course, that helps, with the not having bubbles, in the
Yeah.
water column. Raz, who is one of the producers, he was only on a open circuit. He was diving. But for me, rebreather is like a great tool that you can use when you're wanting to, like, you don't have to go back up, you don't have to change your tank, you don't have to, off gas there on the top, get that
Yeah.
nitrogen down and then go for a second dive. I mean, in terms of working when you're doing something, I mean, you can just pop out like 4 hours and get your work done. I mean, and that's like, if you think about it, that's really a lot. It saves you a lot of time,
Yeah.
where I might get hungry or something. That's how that's the only time when I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm hungry. I need to go back up.
It's never
But
hungry for me. I'm just dying for another brew. That's what it is.
yeah. And so, I mean, so there's really some great things I feel like rebreathers can bring, but they can be a little testy. There's been, if you're traveling with them, it's a lot of weight to take. I found, like, with my rebreather, if you take it someplace, it can like act up. It's like pissed off at you for a little bit. It's like, "Ugh, you're not supposed to take me, away." And then it will just like have alarms and you have to like figure out, like, what's the problem? We're
Yeah.
just at a new dive place. It's okay. So with scuba diving, some of the areas with I work with mantas, they're some, like you were saying, they seem to like the bubbles. I found that in Yap. They are used to divers. They've been having divers there for 30 years, diving with the mantas.
Yeah.
Some of them are they are completely fine with it. Coming in and kind of stalling over the bubbles. So I think it kind of tickles them, as it goes up.
Yeah.
And I have found, though, that if I try and do less bubbles, oftentimes you get them coming over and sticking around you a little bit longer too. So, it just kind of depends on the individual, and what kind of tool that you use in your toolbox,
Mm.
So, um, in Ponape, I'm always like, I get bummed because we don't have nitrox there. So I'm breathing regular air, and so I like
Yeah.
nitrox because, it's tired afterwards. And,
Yeah.
I just like it a little bit better. But there, it's just, they just don't have the capability yet,
Yeah.
at least, to do nitrox. And so we just use regular air there. But amazing, amazing marine life out there, and you're the only boat. I mean, that's
Wow.
what's kind of cool to some of these places. You're the only boat there, and
Yeah.
you just pick and choose where you're going to go, talk to the captain beforehand, and they just take you out
Really.
there. And
It's totally different to when we go to the Red Sea and we can turn up on what we think is going to be,
yeah,
a dive site we've looked forward to for months in the build up. You get there and there's another 20
yeah,
boats on it with proper
yeah,
Scooby Dooers that are kicking all the silt up, and
yeah,
you're like, oh,
yeah,
waited my entire life to get here,
yeah,
and then you
yeah,
just can't see a thing. It's horrendous.
yeah. Yeah, no, it can be really frustrating, and and you can understand where, they're wanting to utilize, and businesses and stuff like that, but at the same time, I think there really has to be kind of, you need to find that right balance of
Mm,
because then people don't get the experience they want, and they kind of go away going disappointed, like,
yeah.
oh, maybe I won't go there again,
Mm,
and so you want people to go away going, yeah, I'm coming back here again for sure,
absolutely.
like, I'll sign me up for the next trip. So,
So what rebreather do you use?
I Poseidon
Yeah.
7, so I use a 7. So
Okay. What
yeah,
made you what made you choose that one?
so it actually was just a group. Um, I got certified with a group of scientists. So we were actually, it's kind of a weird story, but we were out in Ponape, of all places. So my friend Sonia Rowley, she actually she does coral research, really deep depths, with Richard Pyle and Brian Green. And my friend from Steve Lenfield from Palau, he was wanting to use a 7 as well. And so we're like, hey, let's go get certified and we'll be diving with them. And so that's what we did. We actually went out to Ponape and I did my 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 dives out there. So
Yeah.
got certified in from Brian out there, which was amazing because at the same time we were actually, after we got certified, then we went right into doing research.
Mm.
So we were supporting, Sonia was going deeper with Brian, and so we were supporting him when they kind of got a little bit higher. Wasn't able to go those deep depths yet.
I suppose it
So,
makes sense that if one's using a particular unit, everyone else uses the same one. For Spurs, certainly where you are,
yeah.
it's going to be a much easier way of sorting everyone's problems out, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And especially since I was diving a lot with my friend Steve, and we both study like fish spawning aggregations,
Mm.
and he was in Palau, I'm in Guam, so it made sense that we were diving a lot together. And so if there's I can know we can know each other's rigs really,
Yeah.
so if something happens, it. And you can share parts too, so there was oftentimes like we had an extra computer that we would send back and forth, like for a backup,
Yeah.
so he'd be like, oh, can you send me the computer, the extra computer? And so I'd ship it off to him,
Yeah.
so or we would, both have our kits and stuff like that. So I'd be like, oh, I have
Mm.
an extra O-ring, or so it just made things a lot easier, with that, to all of us being on the same rigs. So
Cool.
yeah, so
So the BBC came knocking at your door quite recently.
they
How did
did.
that go?
Wow, it was amazing. I mean, first of all, um, they I guess they had found out my information from I gave a presentation at a shark conference in Africa. And so they had heard about it and ring me up, or message me and said, hey, we'd like to see some of your footage and stuff that you from the presentation that you gave. And so I sent that off to RAS, and they really liked it. And then they just scheduled, and they were going to be out here to do the filming. And so, it was really exciting. They made it super easy, and as at first I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, what if the mantas decide not to come in? Like what
Yeah.
happens? Like they're coming as production, and what if the fish, just like I
Yeah.
had all these what ifs coming in my head, like, oh my gosh, because
Yeah.
they're relying on this. I'm like, I know it's happening, but just what if, that
Yeah.
one week or something happens, and they decide.
Yeah.
But it didn't. It happened, and it was really fun to be able to share with them, just my work,
Yeah.
and being able to, say, no, you want to be right here. This is where the fish are gonna go off. You're gonna get this great shot, of them all coming in and the mantas coming in to feed. And so it wasn't, they were really easygoing too, which was really nice. I had never worked with a film crew before. So you kind of wonder like, oh no, they're going to come in and be like, oh, and they weren't, yeah,
No.
and they were, they're so down to earth, and
Yeah.
they had great stories about all the places they've been filming. And so we just had a blast with them. And then we had a big party, of course, at the very end, and,
Ace.
properly sent them off, on their
Yeah.
way from a good island send off, barbecue and food and margaritas and all that kind of
Brill.
thing. So, yeah. So for me, it had been a couple years, because it takes about, a year and a half to 2 years for them to do all the, editing and putting it and then releasing it.
Yeah.
Um, and it was so amazing to actually see it on film on the TV.
Yeah.
And then you have Attenborough, like,
Yeah.
talking, and I was like, oh my gosh, if you would have told that Utah girl who was doing laundry, for three little kids, being like, there's got to be something more to life, that,
Yeah.
oh hey, don't worry about it, you're gonna have this, your work's gonna be in a film, and you're gonna have David Attenborough, who's talking about it, and I would have never I wouldn't ever believe that. I would have sold myself short, and so I think right there is that what things I've kind of told my kids is don't sell yourself short,
Yeah.
like, like if the door is open, like think about going through it, like just leave doors open for
Barge that
opportunity.
door down. If it's not
I know.
open, barge through it.
I always say I go the back door too. I
Yeah.
do. I always find like the way around, it's never
Yeah.
like like going straight through it and but I think that's part of it is like if you're persistent, like if I would have listened to everyone that said, "Oh, you shouldn't study mantas," or "Oh, you shouldn't go into marine biology," or I even had my own people telling me that they didn't, believe in what I was doing, or they canceled my first advisor. I switched advisors. So when I first started and I thought, when I had this theory that the the fish were spawning and the mantas were coming in, I had two target dates. So I had seen it in a YouTube of someone around Guam, and so I contacted him and I was like, "Hey, I'm not this weirdo, like I'm just interested."
I love that's how you introduce yourself. Hi, just letting you know before we start, I'm not weird.
Well, like I'm contacting him on YouTube, like who
Yeah.
does that? I'm like, I'm not
Me
this
all the time to
pervert.
get people on this podcast.
So I contacted him and I was like, I saw your video of the mantas and the fish spawning, and can I talk to you? Can we meet up?
Yeah.
And so I had met up with him, and he told me about what he saw. And then I also had another friend who is a outrigger paddler. I'm a paddler as well. And she told me, she said, we were paddling and we saw a bunch of mantas, and it looked, when we got in the water, it looked like the fish were spawning and they were eating off it. So I had like these two dates that I know people had seen it in like 2010. And I looked at the moon phase and I transposed that to what it would be in 2012. And so I had actually two target dates. And so I was like, this is my theory. My theory is that, my hypothesis is that we're going to go over the reef on this day at this moon phase, and we're going to find fish spawning and we're going to have mantis feeding. And my first target date, my advisor at the time, we had worked all day, and then we're going to go out and do our our survey. And we got back to the boat, or got back to the marine lab, and he's like, I'm canceling your survey. I was like, canceling it? Like, I only have two target dates. Like, so I
Yeah.
actually called up a friend who was the guys whose video YouTube I saw, and it said, hey, my survey got canceled, but I want to still do it. And I believe it's happening. I think we should go out. And he's like, I'll meet you there. Let's go. And sure enough, went over and we had like thousands of fish. We had like 14 mantas, So it happened. And my whole point of this is like, if I would have just gone, oh, okay, it's canceled, my advisor canceled. So I guess I got to do what he says, then I wouldn't have gone out, And so I believed that it was happening and he shouldn't have canceled it. And I went off anyway and did it. And sure enough, it was happening,
Yeah.
So my whole point is just, sometimes you do have to knock that door down, or you do just have to go around people who are trying to stop you in the way,
Yeah.
So, be persistent,
Yeah. I think that's one of the nicest parts of running this podcast. There's a lot of work that goes into it in the background, but
hmm
I meet some such inspirational people that hopefully people who listen to the podcast feel inspired by. But
Yeah.
they've changed what I've done over the last 6 or 8 months since we've come through all this lockdown stuff in the UK.
Yeah.
My life, I turned 40 and I took a big look at my life and went, I've been not so much a spectator, but I certainly
Yeah.
don't want to be looking back at 60, so another 20 years, and going, oh, I wish I'd have done
hmm
this, and I wish I'd have done that. So I've
Yeah.
just gone for it, and I don't
Yeah.
really know where I'm going to end up. I've no real
Yeah.
sort of end goal. I just want
Yeah.
to be more involved in diving, and that's obviously how I ended
Yeah.
up on that course recently, the HSE
Yeah.
Professional Scuba, where I met Sarah, who's the producer for the
Yeah.
BBC, who worked on Perfect Planet. I think it was
Yeah.
episode 4
Yeah, it
that
was.
you're on.
It's the ocean. Yeah. No,
How?
you're right. I think it's, I call it pivoting. You can people either pivot, or you just are persistent about it and just keep on going. For me, I guess it was when way back during when I was trying getting my divorce, my from my ex-husband, I sat down and I had to decide what I believe in, on whether, I just kind of wrote a blank page and like, okay, well, what actually do I believe in? I believe in being a good person. I believe in, and just started building off of that. And I think, I think those kind of things I didn't want to, and one of the driving factors was thinking about my deathbed. When I'm on my deathbed, I don't want to regret something. What are the things if I'm laying there and when I'm trying to make decisions, like what am I going to really regret? And then that oftentimes like defines how I pivot, in my
Yeah.
life. Like, for me, I just recently when I was talking about it with my husband, like I want to get my PhD. And part of that is, and I'm 50, but I don't care. I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
I want to be able to take all of the work that I've done and make it mean something, not only in the work that I'm doing, but also for myself and for my community that I live in. So,
Yeah.
like, I think, maybe people have different ways of like kind of doing priorities in their life. But that's always mine, where I was like sit down and be like, what am I going to really regret, on my deathbed, I probably won't be like, oh, I should have got in another shopping day, For me, it's going to be like, like it's going to
Yeah.
be like, oh, I should have gone to Raja Ampat, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I should have been diving here, For me,
Mm,
that's important, having those experiences and being underwater. So,
absolutely. So making that breakthrough where you tied in the phases of the moon, the fish spawning,
mhm,
aggregations, and the mantas all
yeah,
coming in, was that like a
yeah,
world first? Did people not know about that at all?
yeah. No, it was a first. So, I mean, we had always kind of known that. So, the only other kind of similar thing that happens in Belize, you have a place where um, you have fish that are spawning, and whale sharks come in to feed off
Right.
of the spawn. And so that was and you had like kind of general, like we knew reefs in Australia, have a spawning, and so therefore, you at certain times of the year you see more mantas coming in and feeding, but never where it was like so specific where they're targeting to feed. I mean, they're I was just out with them. I mean, and that they were going faster. They just can't wait for those fish to spawn because they're so excited to feed, and they're going faster in their behaviors, and so they're targeting it. They know when it's happening.
Yeah.
And typically they're not there. If the fish aren't spawning, they're typically not there. So once in a
How
while you
often
might.
does that happen?
So you had different times. It happens, a couple of weeks out of the month. But you also have times of overlap. So we also have another fish that spawns in a morning time. So you have some that are starting like in the evening, and you have some that are doing it in the morning. So sometimes I'm doing surveys like morning and evening. So those can be really
Terrible.
tiring days. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it is. I bet it's terrible. Tropical island and in the sea every day. Sounds
Yeah,
horrendous.
I know it is. That's really, feel bad for me. So
No, not at all.
no, no, don't. No, I mean, it can get tiring because it is. I'm in the water, I got in the water at 4:45 and I got out at 7. So, it's a
Mm,
good chunk of swimming, and
yeah,
when you're doing that in the morning and in the evening, it
yeah, I
can
bet.
it can wear you out. So, but it's a good thing. I'm always
A
pumped.
good
I'm
worn out.
so ready. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
right now, like tonight we just had we had mantas that were like doing mating behavior. So you have
Wow.
the female out front, and you have the males that follow, like in a train behind her.
Yeah.
And then she kind of does these flips and these, turns to see, who's behind her and who can keep up with her. And
Yeah.
because that's, their best defense mechanism to any kind of natural prey, is to be fast.
Mm.
And so she was doing that. And then we also had a pregnant female out there that we've been
Oh,
watching.
wow.
And yeah, you kind of, this particular manta we call Sweet Samantha. And she has like this little curve in her tail. And so you go up and you kind of do kind of a sideway look, because when the mantas are pregnant, they show it on out their back and their belly. So, so you kind of have to look sideways and see how the angle is of the manta, and you can really see the bump
Right.
on the back, and then you can see the little bump on the tummy. And then we had a bunch of little juveniles out there too that are always fun.
Oh,
They're
sweet.
always, yeah, they always like to come in and spin around you. They're really curious, they act really different than the adults. They're like overly excited about stuff and come in really fast
Yeah.
and then like slow down, like come in, just like
Brill.
little kids. So yeah, so it just never gets, I love it.
Tiring.
It never gets old. So again,
Because
again tomorrow.
yeah. How did they give
Yeah,
birth?
it's a live birth. So they have one pup, and they have one every 2 to 3 years, but in some places it's 5 years. So that's
Yeah.
why it's really important to study all particular areas. It can be quite different. So you want to set up management
Yeah.
for them differently, pertaining to your area. So every 2 to 3 years, they might have one pup. Pregnancy is 13 months, so gestational time. The pregnancy lasts 13 months. That's a
Quite a while,
long
isn't it?
time. Yeah. And it's a big baby. So it's like, at least 1 meters, 1.5 meters
Wow.
in length. Yeah. So it's a big baby.
It's as big as
It's,
me.
yeah. Yeah.
No
They're kind
wonder
of
they
like
wait for another 5 years before they have another
yeah,
one.
yeah, they're kind of rolled up like a burrito when they come out, and there's no parental care. So they're
No.
just kind of, yeah. No, when
See ya.
we've seen the little ones, they're like trying to get how to swim still. It's kind of really fun. It's kind of like when you see like a deer or
Baby deer.
something, or a
Yeah.
baby deer, they're trying to, that's how the mantas are. They're like, wow, they're trying to get how they're
Yeah.
gonna swoop in, and yeah, so it's and it takes an adult female at least 8 to 10 years to hit maturity, and in some places it might be even a little bit longer. And so that's why they're so susceptible to some of the when they're targeted in fishing for their gill rakers and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so dangerous. They're like sharks, where you can easily devastate a population by
Mm.
fishing them.
Yeah.
So you have those things, late to maturity. They don't have any, pump, one pup every 2 to 3 years. All those things kind of add up for when you have uh, targeted fishing that
Yeah.
can be devastating to populations.
It's
So,
not the first time I've heard that term, gill rakers. Like I said earlier, we'd studied
hmm
basking sharks up in Scotland
hmm
late summer last year, and obviously them being filter feeders, they talked about these
yeah,
gill rakers are where they collect the plankton as they're swimming through, and then they kind of swallow it off that, don't they?
yeah.
But why
hmm
why would why would someone target a species for gill rakers? What can they use them for? Is it like some weird medicine or something?
Yeah, it's usually like medicinal medicine kind of a thing,
Mm.
um, and it's not. They found that it isn't really historic, so it's not like it's an ancient recipe,
No.
that say, yeah, no, it's something that's been added, earlier. So, um,
Weird, isn't it?
so it's not something, that they typically would have used, but that unfortunately that happens a lot in, some of the markets and stuff like that. And
Mm.
and they go in and target areas. And unfortunately, it's places that too where you have you can get into economics, with the issues. People are just trying to earn a living, and they
Yeah.
don't it's usually in countries where they don't have very much, and it's a third world country or something, and so it's easy to go in and get money for them, pay money and devastate populations pretty fast. So
Shame in it.
yeah. But hopefully, I mean, everyone's doing, a lot of people are doing a lot of good work, and so globally, and trying to get the word out, and why there shouldn't be. I mean, you look at some of the real um, campaigns for, not having shark fin soup and those kind of things, and
Mm.
you can really see a lot of difference that's being made. So I think it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
I have hope, you know.
I've got a question for you, because
Yeah.
I've always wanted to know, and it's not something I've ever actually sat down and just Googled it, and you must know.
Yeah.
So it's a strange looking animal, the manta, isn't it? Because it's got these, I want to call it like a mandible, but it's not, because that's
Yeah.
part of its jaw. But these two big paddles that come around the front, what are
Yeah.
them for? Because the reason I ask, obviously I've wanted to know, but when I watched the BBC Perfect
Mhm.
Planet, I should get that right,
Yeah.
and there's one particular scene where one of the mantas swimming over the cameraman, and it almost curls this paddle over, like rolls it.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
so it must have a
Yeah.
function. It must do something. Are they part of steering mechanisms or what?
Yeah, they're really cool. They're called cephalic fins. So
Cephalic.
yeah, cephalic fins. So it's like you said, they're really it's actually a good term is paddle like.
Yeah.
So they can use them, and when they're just cruising, like you said, they actually can curl them up, and they look like little horns on the side. And so that's how you got like the terminology devil horn, the devil rays, that
Yeah.
because it looks like little horns like up at the top. But they use them to like be able to funnel in. So like even tonight, they were really using them to curl in by their mouth so they could really get as much of the food and the water running over their gills as possible. So
Yeah.
they can actually really use them to funnel in kind of, and I believe sensory as well.
Mm.
They do what's called bottom feeding, where they can actually take them out to the side like this and
Yeah.
go along kind of the bottom of the sand, and then they could push down a little bit with them, and so then it forces the water down, and then it pushes off the bottom, so all that kind of food that's kind of settled on the bottom kind of comes up
Mm.
a little bit. And so we call that bottom feeding.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can tell when they have a little bit of sand on their backs and stuff like that, when they've been doing kind of that behavior as well.
Right.
So they'll use them. Yeah. So it's a way to get as much food in their mouth, and kind of a sensory as well. I mean, they obviously have really good sensory, because I've seen it. When the fish spawn, you'll see this cloud sometimes. I mean, it depends. When the fish spawn, sometimes the water's just all, you know, spawn. So it's like all
Yeah.
white. And like even tonight, like we were running into mantas because the water just is like, you cannot see anything from all the
Yeah.
fish spawning. But then there's other times where you have little groups of fish spawning. So it'll be like you can see it in the water column where it's like a puff, this little tiny puff. And all of a sudden, like here comes a manta from way far away, just coming straight at it, and it didn't see it, but it knows exactly where it's at, and just like funnels in
They
that
must have some
spawn.
kind of smell within the water,
Yeah.
mustn't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it would be really fun. I've tried it in my head, so that's like kind of the geeky science part of me. But like trying to figure like, okay, well, how would you set up an experiment, or a study to like do that? Like an aquarium setting, they could do that easily. You can put in on one side of the aquarium where you have a
Mm.
manta, and you can put in kind of a sensory and see how long it takes it to go over, or that kind of thing. But then you're always having to reference that the aquariums are not like the open ocean. So it's always the caveat. It's like, well, does that really happen out in the real world, in the real
Yeah.
ocean? Same thing with like, like how long animals live for, that kind of thing. It might be different in a
Yeah.
controlled setting like that versus in the open ocean.
Mm.
And so I've like oftentimes like geese side of me is like, okay, well, how can I do that? I can, how can I set something up? I can get some fish spawn and like shoot it out and then like look at the time and then it would come over. But okay, I'll stop. That's a science part of me that's always ticking.
Yeah. Well, speaking of
So,
science, you mentioned earlier that you sort of next sort of project will be to sort of
mm,
track and monitor the movements in the water.
yes. Yeah,
You
we're
got some funding, aren't
super
you?
excited. Yeah, we just barely got from the University of Guam Sea grant. We just got $40,000 grant. And I mean what's so great is that I mean that is there's a lot of work that's being put in for free with that, like I'm not getting paid or
So you're not
that
buying a
kind
new
of thing.
car with it then, no?
Yeah, no, if anything, yeah. If anything, it's so great because I have two other friends who are helping me, Dr. Mark Erdman out of New Zealand and Sarah Lewis out of Indonesia. And so we're really good friends. They're gonna come and we're gonna use splash tags on him. And it's kind of like the Cadillac of satellite tags because it gives you really fine vertical and horizontal movement. And when I say that, it means like it's almost like a GPS. You can get very accurate data. And that's important for Guam because we're 7 miles by 30-mile island. So
Wow.
we're tiny. We're a tiny island. Like when I drive around the island, when I do it around the island, it's like 2 hours. And that's
Yeah.
like going around the beaches, the peripheral. Um, and so when you want to know habitat, you really need that fine scale. And so you use these tags where they're kind of tethered a little bit off of the mantis. So every single time the manta kind of comes up to the surface, it's going to ping off to the satellite and tell you where it's at.
Is that why it's
And
called a splash tag? Because it'll splash on the surface.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of yeah, so it will just kind of get up there on the surface, break it, and then the satellite will download the information for you. And then with that, you can really see that fine scale movement. So you can say where it's been at the top of the island, or now it's down at the bottom, or it might be off, on the shelf. And then you can also gather all the diving. Eventually, it pops off. It takes about 6 months. And then you can even get even more information that's been downloaded onto the tag itself. So we're really excited about it. We have 6 tags. And that's kind of a big deal for Guam because we have a really small population. Right now, we have 60 mantas. And when you have areas where, they'll have thousands in their database, but
Mm.
Guam we call it a micro population that's really small, but
Yeah.
I see the same mantas over and over and over. So I get to know them really well, so I can see the babies, I can see the pregnant ones, we, can see, and so this is for that small population, that's a large amount that we're going to find out about their behaviors. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of a fun, new, exciting, research out in this region. It's the first of its kind out in this area. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
I suppose to get 10% of like you said, a bigger population somewhere else,
Hmm.
that's you're talking thousands of tags, aren't you? You've
Yeah.
done it in just
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of things, it was funny when I first started studying the Guam mantas and be like, oh, you just have a little population, like,
Yeah.
you're not like us, we have thousands over here.
Yeah.
Um, but I found like you want to learn, you want that information just as much, if not, it can help you you can determine like how are the reproduction rates compared to larger populations. So if you have an area that's overfished, you can kind of see like how long it might take to actually recover, kind of a thing, and so there's ways in which you can take what you're in doing a small population and really add to the puzzle, the overall puzzle of
Yeah.
what it looks like. So yeah, so it is. It's really quite exciting. So yeah,
Cool.
one of the other things I really want to do is tissue DNA. So you can look at like, so who would actually, you have all these mantas, but who's like the main dad? Is
Do you
there
like the
like,
family tree of it?
yeah, like a family, yeah, just like how we do ours, you can do that as well. And so like when you're looking at mantas and you're seeing a mating train, is the first male behind really the dad, or is it number three who just kind of waits back there and slips in, like
Slips in. So we've done religion, we've done politics, and sex ed.
yes.
Brilliant. Oh,
So I mean, so there's a lot of, I'm really excited. So
I
this
bet.
next couple of years, I'm really excited to, see what happens and unfolds, and see if we can find more spawning aggregations that the mantas are going to. And so yeah, it's exciting.
Bet it is. Right, just wrapping up things then.
Yeah,
Um how might someone like myself who's going to the Red Sea in the beginning of June, and we're hopefully going to see quite a few mantas,
yeah,
how
yeah.
would I identify the difference between a male and a female? Is there an
Uh,
obvious difference? Do they have like
yes,
claspers like on a note on a shark?
yes, it's exact same thing. So, like, yeah, just like on the shark, we have the two little claspers.
Yeah.
The same thing. The males for mantas have claspers. The females don't. Where it gets difficult is when you have a smaller manta. So that's when you really have to get like up close and personal and be like, in their junk and be like, is there some claspers? Because they're like these little tiny. I call them nuggets. They're just
Yeah.
little tiny, and so they haven't calcified. They're not growing. So it's easy to mistaken the little guy as a female, but it's not. And so
Yeah.
and it just happens. Most of our juveniles are little boys, and you can. And I track it, so I track, when their claspers get to the bottom of their caudal fin, we call.
Yeah.
So before that, they're way up there, and then they grow to the caudal fin area, and
Yeah.
then they go past that, and then they get kind of calcified, and you can tell they've been using them. So we actually document all that.
I
I take
didn't think we'd be
pictures.
talking about this today, to be
I
fair.
know. Hey, it's just what you got to do. So
Yeah.
just study them. So, um, same thing with the female. Like tonight, we had a female who they were training up behind, but you could tell that they'd been mating with her because she had scars on her. It's not deep scars. It kind of looks like scratches
Yeah.
on her left pectoral fin. So the male actually grabs on to the female on her left pectoral. For some reason, they always like the left. They're lefties, and they grab onto the left side of her. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then they go belly to belly, and it's internal fertilization.
Right.
And that's how they copulate, is by internal fertilization. And then they break away, and
Mm.
that's how we document that. So I take pictures of the male parts, and then the female and her pectoral fin, to say, hey, yeah, she has been, obviously they've been grabbing onto her, so there's a good chance. And
Yeah.
then I keep watching her, so then next year, to see if she's pregnant or not. So that's kind of how we kind of track along. But it's fun for me because I get to know the mantas here really well. In other areas, it's a big deal to get a resighting of a manta, or
Yeah.
but I spend so much time that I get to know their personalities. I can, you know, I've seen them when they've been caught on fishing line and been able to remove it and get it off, and see them heal up. And so it is, it's quite rewarding for
Well,
me.
that was going to be my next question. How much sort of physical interaction do you get with them?
Yeah, so it's funny, you have some that are so personable, like they come straight over to you, and like tonight I was free diving with them, and I'll get down there, and then you have some particular ones that will come and then they stall. It's like they want to hang out with you for a little bit and they stall right over and like, okay, like I really need a deep breath. Like I need to go up. Love to hang out with you more, but I really need to go get some air.
Back in a minute.
Yeah.
Wait there, I'll be back in a sec.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, for me, it really is interactive with these individuals, and getting to know like the especially little juveniles you have, and you have some that are less. You can tell that they like to skirt around the edges, or the males, but then you have some males who are totally come up and hang out with you, check you out. So yeah, like this last, I think it was like May or June, we had a manta that actually had it had gotten wrapped up in a hook, and it had a lure on it and stuff like that. And her name's Bali, and she actually let me go in and cut it off her and get the line off of her. And she stalled. She definitely stalled and let me just work on her and get it eventually off. And she healed up super fast. They have wonderful healing capacity. They're like sharks. So they're able to actually heal up, and get better pretty fast. So
I'd say that's probably that. If I was you, I would suggest that's my sort of biggest reward, is to be able to do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't think of much better.
Yeah, that, and you're able to look at some of maybe their habitats so that we can put in proper management. So maybe there might be times or areas that maybe we don't need to have as much of a certain type of fishing, or maybe suggest
So
a
creating
different
more of like a marine
lure,
protected area.
yeah, or there's just so many different ways, but we have to really understand, exactly where they're spending most of their time, where are they getting hooked up at, maybe suggesting a different type of lure where it can get untangled easier than another type, so those things are like you said, are very rewarding,
Well,
so.
Julie, I can't thank you enough. Honestly, I could talk to you for another hour and a half. Your story's amazing, and you're so easy to talk to, and certainly passionate about what you do. So I'm very grateful for you sharing your evening with me, even though it's my morning.
Oh, you bet. I really, I felt the same way. So it was really easy to talk with you
Nice one.
and share everything. Yeah.
Well, no doubt I'll get over to Guam and come and see
I
you
know.
sometime.
Please do. Yes. And literally, there's some really great diving throughout all of Micronesia, and it's like a hidden treasure, So yeah, please come and join me.
Honestly, that's probably the downside to running this podcast. I've interviewed nearly 70 different people now, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, you should come." I'm like, "I've got this map here. I could go anywhere. When can I go?" Well, you can't go anywhere, can we? It's a nightmare.
I know. Hopefully soon, right? Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, go and enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll no doubt speak to you again. Thanks for coming.
Yes, you bet. Thank you.
Thanks very much to this week's guest for sharing their stories and interesting tales about the underwater world. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I did recording it. For more information on this episode, take a look at the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and follow us on Instagram for the latest news. Thanks again to Northern Diver International and those of you who have supported me through Patreon. Take care, and I'll see you on YouTube.